Welcome to the Synod of the Northeast Church Treasurer Training. I am the Reverend Dr. Sandana Gallman Ashley, and I have the privilege of serving as the Synod leader for the Synod of the Northeast. And we are very happy that you are with us this evening. There's just one housekeeping item we ask that you would just give your attention to. We are recording this evening's webinar for future resourcing. So as you come in this evening, we ask that you would please remain on mute until the question and answer period. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce to you our presenters for this evening. Diane Case holds a business degree with a concentration in nonprofit organizations from Fresno State University in Fresno, California. She has served as the full charge accountant for the Presbytery of San Jose for 32 years, bringing deep expertise in church and nonprofit financial management. Together with Ed, Diane have led treasurer training for more than 20 years, equipping congregational leaders with practical tools to reduce anxiety, increase accuracy, and strengthen financial stewardship. Ed Brenden has been an ordained pastor for more than 50 years, serving 5 congregations and the Presbytery of San Jose, California, as treasurer for 20 years. A graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary, Ed has served congregations in Minnesota and California. He worked with Merrill Lynch and owned his own tax preparation firm. He is the author of several books available on Amazon, including The Church Treasurer's Manual, The Handbook for Church Treasurers, The Volunteer's Audit Guide, and his autobiography, The Drunken Preacher. Before we turn things over to Ed and Diane, I invite you to please join me for a word of prayer. Let us pray. We come today, Creator and Eternal One. We come in the name of Christ, the one who turned over tables and paid his taxes from a coin taken from the mouth of a fish, the one who fed 5,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. We come this day as your gathered people, this evening to learn to steward the resources that you have entrusted us with. May this time of learning be an opportunity to strengthen the gifts of administration, generosity, and helps. We come as those responsible for the widow's mite, for the seeds sown by faithful disciples that understood giving as a spiritual practice. From congregations with much and those with little, we seek your insight and answers to the fiduciary opportunities and challenges of ministry. We give thanks for our facilitators, for Diane and for Ed, and for the wisdom that they bring to the subject, and for the ways in which they resource and support the church. May you always be pleased with our desires, our actions, and our service. In the name of Christ, our Redeemer, we pray. Amen. At this time, I want to turn the webinar over now to our presenters, Ed and Diane. Thank you again for being with the Synod of the Northeast.
Thank you for letting us be here. I'm going to share my screen so we can get started with that. And just let me know that you can see Church Treasurer's Basic. And that's where we're going to start. We believe that everybody ought to have an internal financials control policy of some sort. And if you take this webinar and the outline that's followed here, you can probably create one for your church without any trouble at all. And let's see if I can make it move forward. Why is it not moving forward? There we go. This you'll get a copy of all these slides. I'll make sure that the Synod has it for you. My name is there, my email, my phone number, and my address. Diane's information is there as well. We are comfortable with you getting in touch with us with any of your questions that you have at any time. So please feel free to ask, and we'll see what we can do to answer for you. I have available, as Shandana said, these three books available for you on Amazon. Just look under my name with two D's as the beginning of that, and you'll find them there. And all of the information we're going to talk about here, plus a whole lot more, is included there. The Church Treasurer's Manual is 300 and some pages long. So, and it's been recently updated, even though it says on the website that it's from 2019 or something like that. It really is from 2026. So feel free to grab those for your help as well. The treasurer's role, if we start there, is really to oversee all aspects of the financial well-being of the church. All of the different things that the treasurer has under their responsibility comes back to that question of how do we make sure the church is financially well taken care of, and the finances are clearly reported to the congregation, especially the board, and then to the congregation at appropriate times. We feel like every church, every financial position ought to have a job description and review them once a year. They don't have to be long, they can be 3 or 4 sentences, but it's helpful if that job description is there, especially if you're going to replace the person, because people like to know what they're getting into. If you're like me, I mean, I've been around the church for 50 years. Usually somebody asks you if you could do something and you don't really find out what you're really going to be doing until after you've said yes, and then you get overwhelmed by all of this stuff. Having a job description will help people avoid that. The Church Treasurer's Manual has a list of guidelines for what should be included in job descriptions for people along the way. So that's a resource that's available for you. Policies, if they aren't included in an internal financial control guide, should be the different kinds of policies where even though you probably already account for finances or expenses that you give out, you should have a policy in place of how you account for those expenses. The IRS requires that we have one of those, and if we're going to be expensing money out to people, especially on the staff, so that we can tell that it really has been accounted for and doesn't have to become salary to them, those kinds of things. Cash disbursement, conflict of interest, financial practices, gift acceptance policies. Those are all policies that are very beneficial to you having in writing so that people know what to expect beforehand. And again, most of these policies should be reviewed at least every other year so that you're not living with a policy that is 10, 15, 20 years old, as most people are. The more you review it, the more you will actually practice what you have reviewed and comply with your policies. That is important for your tax exempt purposes. Talk more about that later. Diane, we're going to talk about the filing system now. And
Okay, there's two kinds of filing, temporary because most people keep things for too long, and permanent. There are some things you are okay to keep for longer periods of time. Some people's file systems are the old cardboard boxes, and that's fine as long as you have a safe place to store them where they're not going to get ruined by heat, water, or any other elements. Um, every year you should go through your files and shred at least 1 year's worth of stuff because you don't need to keep all these accounts payable in particular for more than 3 years. Vendor files can be stored online through your accounting software, depending on your software, or in electronic cloud-based storage is another way if you don't want to store it in a box. You need a copy of the invoice and how you paid it. Did you pay it by check? Did you pay it electronically through bill pay? Did you pay it on your credit card? Did you pay it through an ACH? Attach something that shows how you paid it, or at least record the transaction number on that invoice, and then file it either through your accounting system. The one we use at the Presbyterian San Jose allows me to attach the invoice to the payable once I've paid it. And that's what we do so that it's there and we don't have a paper copy of that. We do in our online storage put the actual invoices that have been paid. So if somebody needs to see if we paid something. Permanent files are,
I'm on my meeting.
do you know where your articles of incorporation are? Your bylaws, your 501c3 letter, any deeds and titles to your property, or if it's a synod or a presbytery, your church's property. All that needs to be in a safe place, and more than one person needs to know where this is in case of illness, a trip, or death, and something happens. You can try changing codes and passwords annually and get new keys, and that can help, but keys are a little harder to change annually. Okay, security. Some churches, we know, at least in our presbytery, the smaller ones, their safe spot is their safe deposit box. Okay, you need to know what bank the safe deposit box is in, and more than one person needs to know where it is and what's in there, and how to get it out because we have had where people have died and they've had trouble accessing stuff at the bank, so you don't want that. Secure document online. Our presbytery uses box.com, and you can invite people to share or you can keep it to just the staff members. And it's really helped us be able to share things with committees and have more online meetings, and people can just go, like I upload the financials every month, and the people on financial affairs go and pull the report and can see it from month to month. And they don't have to worry about did they get it in an email or where did they put it. So I highly recommend that. Make sure you have good antivirus software, which I'm sure you all do in this day and age, and be careful of phishing expeditions for people trying to get your bank account information, credit card, and personal information. That is out there, and we will talk more about that later. Protecting the church's money from fraud. That's become a big issue, especially in church organizations and other nonprofits. Make sure you have a policy and know how to protect yourself from fraud, from individuals as well as corporations. Make sure you have it written in your insurance policy what happens if you have fraud and how you go about filing a claim. Sometimes you can do everything right and then realize you still have fraud. Several years ago, our office was somebody stole a check from the mailbox and altered it and cashed it. Okay, we were able to file a police report and a claim and get the money back, but it took 9 months to get our money. We did collect on the insurance and then had to pay it back. You need, if you still write checks, which we do not anymore, there's a way to check and see how secure your check is. When you print your check, take a piece of Scotch tape and try to lift off the name and address on your check. If you do that about 4 times and the ink comes off, that's how people are altering checks. That means your checks aren't safe. You should order new checks with all the electronic coding in it to make it safer. Okay. All your reports should go through sessions so that they're reviewing everything on a monthly basis, and your annual reviews are a great way to deter, and we will talk about them as we get further into the slides.
This next one, Diane, you didn't
This
see
next
the
one just
slide, but
happened
you knew
last
about this.
week.
Yeah.
I have a church that has a preschool. Okay, this guy shows up, calls up, and says he wants to register his child for preschool. He moved to the area. Turns and they took his cashier's check and deposited it, but they were questioning why there was no co-parent and they weren't allowed to talk to the other parent. So a couple days go by and the guy calls back and says his child is sick and in the hospital and he wants his money back. Well, by that point, they looked at the cashier's check and decided it wasn't for real, and they went to the bank and challenged it. They finally had to put in a police report, and the man has been calling and harassing the staff at this church ever since. Stick to your guns. If you think something doesn't look right, do so. The bank is not going to catch most of these things. The banks have too many checks just whizzing through their system and they're not going to catch them. You have to catch them. Okay? Passwords and keys. Who's the keeper of your keys? Does somebody have the keys? Does somebody know who else has the keys? Okay? And if you change locks or if you get a new door, who do you have a locksmith that you trust that will get you keys? If you lease to different organizations, some of your property, be very careful and have in the lease what keys they are allowed to have and use. And when they leave, if they decide not to lease anymore, you have to change those locks, okay? Computer passwords. We all have a zillion passwords. There is software out there to store it, like 1Password and LastPass. Work very well. Change your passwords at least annually, but make sure somebody knows where those passwords are stored, that you find is a trusting person higher up, because we had a death of our stated clerk several years ago and we could not get into his computer and neither could his wife. I don't want that to happen to you. Okay. There is paperwork that has to be filled out every year. And since you guys are all from different states, there may be more in your state. We're just familiar with California. But there's a statement of information saying what kind of business you're in, your payroll tax forms. You have to register with the Attorney General every year. And you may have local property tax exemption forms, and business tax forms also may be required. That's on a state and county to decide. At the time of a new treasurer, you need to have treasurer's training. We try to do a treasurer's training once or twice a year just for our presbytery alone, but we do it for other entities, obviously, as you can see here. Do not make loans to your employees. Do not commingle funds. We will talk about restricted funds as we get further into this. Keep them separate and understand what is restricted and what is non-restricted. Non-restricted is for expenses. Restricted funds will show up on your balance sheet. Okay? On your balance sheet, your restricted funds are going to be authorized by the board Oh, and you would put, in our case, we put a B by it so everybody knows it's by board. If we put a D by it, it means it's donor restricted, and that you will find that on our balance sheet. And I recommend that to everybody because you're not going to be there maybe in 10 or 20 years. You don't know, and somebody needs to know what the restriction, who restricted this, and how, if they want to change it, they can. Okay. Treasurers are asked to open and close accounts on behalf of the organization, be it bank accounts, credit cards, sometimes even utilities and other accounts payables. Do not ever open anything with your social security number. Only use the organization's EIN number. It can be very hard to get a credit card because of this, but there are banks out there that will give you a credit card, but not for more than like $20,000 with the church's EIN and not your social, because you don't want to be responsible if somebody, because it's usually a credit card for the whole organization. You do not want to be responsible if somebody runs up a bill and then doesn't pay it. The board needs to approve who has signing privileges for checks and other leases and other activities that go on. Review everything annually and see if the signers need to change or if you need to change any of your review process.
Let's talk about income for a moment. There are a lot of ways in which you can receive money. The majority of money comes to the church through contributions, but you should be familiar with stock contributions, especially in times like this where capital gains are high and people want to donate to the church with stock. We have appreciated stock. We have used our presbytery account for a lot of the churches so that they don't have to open up their own brokerage account in order to process this. We'll receive the money and then pass on the cash to the church. But you can work with your synod or your presbytery to do something along those lines. There's a variety of income, retirement income sources like QCDs, which are qualified charitable distributions, or RMDs, which are both beneficial for people to send directly to the church instead of taking it in as income and then contributing to the church. There are a lot of tax advantages for that, especially less of their Social Security income gets taxed. So something for you to use as sort of an encouragement for people to give to the church. Can encourage people to be beneficiaries of, or have the church be a beneficiary of the life insurance. You can lease your facilities. You can use cell towers. You can have endowment incomes at the Presbyterian Foundation that give you money on a regular basis, that sort of thing. So it's important for you to be aware of all the different kinds of income that could come your way. But the main thing down near the bottom there on the right is to be aware of what might be unrelated to business income. That is income that is not substantially related to your tax exempt purpose. And I've always often said that if it's not how you use the money, because a lot of people say, well, we raise this money so we can spend it on the church's needs. It's also important how you raise the money as to whether or not it is related to your exempt purpose or not. The collecting of money, we all are familiar with the ushers and collecting the money and then putting it in a safe place, hopefully. It's important to figure out what are the best methods to collect. I know many of you went through COVID like the rest of us did, and you had to go to online contributions or things of that sort. There's PayPal, there's Venmo, there's Zelle, many things I'm still not even familiar with, but my kids are, and my grandkids are, and so you've got these forms of money coming into the church, and you need to keep good records of who it came from and how much came in. The treasurer has the responsibility to watch over that if they happen to have a quote unquote staff underneath them of people that are working for them. A lot of small churches, the treasurer does all of this themselves, but it's very helpful to have good records. Where did the money come from? How much was given? What funds the amount was given for, and the date of the gift. All of that needs to be listed on the annual statement that goes out to the donor who has given to the church during the past year. Um, the board needs to decide how they're going to handle non-cash gifts. I had a church here in Santa Cruz that was given 2 plots of at a cemetery. Trying to get rid of those is a hard thing to do. So they don't have a lot of cash value, but they did have a value to that person and their donation. Non-cash gifts of stock. The board needs to decide whether they're going to hang on to that stock or whether they want to sell it right away and not be in the investment business. That's a whole other question that we probably ought to talk about. Will a little bit, but not a lot. Collecting money as well in memorial gifts. Every church has a different way of handling memorial gifts. Does the money go into a special fund that is used for special things later on? Or does the money go into the general fund and you just note that somebody has given money in memory of someone else? It's important on all memorial gifts, if you want more of them to be given in the future, to be sure and send thank yous. And receipts to the donor at the time of gift, and let the family know of the names of the people, not the amounts, but the names of the people who have given in memory of their loved one. And then we'll talk about, again, restricted funds, but every time you received a gift where somebody says, even a little note on the check, it doesn't really matter what it is, if it's in writing or a verbal restriction, and you don't already have a restricted fund that's going into, you should ask the board and make sure that they are willing to accept that gift. Don't deposit the check until you get approval from the board to accept that restriction. Again, we'll talk more about that as we go on here. Counting the money. The most important thing here, two important things. One is there should be more than one person doing the counting, if at all possible. I had a small church where one of the counters took the money home with them, kept it at home for a few weeks where their grandchildren lived, actually did the counting, and then sent their grandchildren to the bank to make the deposit. And there are all kinds of ways in which money, especially cash, can be stolen out of that kind of a packet as it leaves the church, goes to the home, goes to the bank. It's really not good to have one person taking care of it, if at all possible. And then make sure there's a paper trail of all of the checks, whether it's a paper trail in the computer or on a piece of paper that the treasurer would have a copy of, so that we can go back into the history and make sure that person's check actually got deposited and those sorts of things. if people call up and say, did you ever get the check that I sent you? So good paper trail is important. Again, deposit the money, make sure you get a deposit slip and it comes back. And if you're using computer software, which I'm assuming most people do these days, that you staple the deposit slip from the bank to the a copy of the deposit information out of the computer. And so that you're keeping good records on depositing money. Again, keeping good records for recording the donation. Each donation should be recorded in a timely fashion, again, by donor, by date, by amount, and by the account for which it was given. And then send receipts to people. Annual statements I'll talk about on the next slide, but receipts should be sent to them if they give you non-cash gifts. One thing that's really important, if I send your church 5 shares of Apple stock and it traded for $250 on the day that I sent it, you cannot send me a receipt for $1,250. You can only send me a receipt that says I gave to the church 5 shares of Apple stock on such and such a date. That's the only information that you should give them. You can put the $1,250 towards your contributions so that the church has a record of that much money coming in on your monthly statement and so forth and so on. But the receipt to the giver, to the donor, should only list what was given. If it's a non-cash gift, it's their responsibility to justify the amount to the IRS when they file their taxes. The donor statement, again, at least annually, but again, it should list the date that it was given, the amount, the donor, the fund that it was given to for, general fund, building fund, deacons fund, whatever that might be. The only reason I would suggest you send these quarterly is that you can put in that quarterly statement a thank you note. You can put in there an opportunity to tell them what's going on and how their gifts are being used. If you don't do that on a weekly basis, the church that I am attending now, no longer pastoring, but the church I'm attending now, they make a habit every single Sunday morning to mention some program that has recently happened in the church and say to the church, it's only because of your generosity that we are able to do the things that we do as a church. And so we thank you for the gifts that you give to us. The more you can say that to the congregation, thank them for their generosity, and tell them how the money is being used, the more the congregation is apt to give more and more because they can see what is happening with their money. The people my age, I understand, and many of you have members in your congregation that are my age. I'm 78 now. I give to the church because I believe I need to give to the church. That's a gift that I give because of who I am. The younger generations have a tendency to give to the church because they see the church doing something good. And so if you want the younger generations to be focused on giving, you want to let them know how that money is being used. Diane, you're up. You're muted, Diane.
Some of you probably still pay with checks and vouchers, and that's perfectly fine. We have a lot of small churches in our presbytery that do that. But the voucher needs to have the amount, who gets paid, their address, and what this is for. The person requesting it should not really come out and say, I want it taken out of this account. That's up to your accountant or bookkeeper or treasurer to decide. Okay, who can sign checks? We talked about that your board or session will decide that, and that you should probably have two people if you do checks. Bear in mind that if only one person signs the check, I don't know of a bank out there that is going to catch that. So the two-person signature is your internal control. The bank does not care. Okay. You want to protect your money. You want to keep the blank checks in a safe place. You want to make sure that only one person knows where they are, but have somebody offsite, like your treasurer, know where they are, but can't get to them in case something happens to you. Keep all canceled checks or a copy of them and attach it to the bill when at all possible. Now, on our accounting system, we just put the invoice and the transaction number and attach it electronically, and that works great. Do not keep the checks around for more than 3 years, and make sure they're in a secure area if you actually keep the canceled checks. A lot of banks aren't giving canceled checks, and that's okay. You can just request them when you need them. I recommend electronic payments as the best bet. You can pay by ACH or bill pay, and you will get a transaction information. Pending on your software, the bank can send the file directly to your software. But if not, there are ways to enter it manually. Positive Pay is a system provided at your bank to prevent fraud, but it costs money, on average $50 a month. They will say, did you send them a file when you cut a check, and they will get it, and they will only approve those checks. Reverse positive pay is a cheap way around that we have found. If you don't cut many checks, why pay $50 a month? Reverse positive pay, the bank notifies you and you have to give permission for that check to be paid. You go into the security settings and authorize payment. However, if you don't do that in 24 hours, it goes through automatically. So you have to have one person assigned that you trust to let that check go through. What I do is send the list of checks to another person that's a signer, and they can go in and approve the checks. When we used to do checks, we don't do checks anymore. But that's a cheap way around it, and it saved people $50 a month. Credit cards. Credit cards are an expenditure that we all need and have, and it sometimes is hard to get for a nonprofit. You really need to find one, if at all possible, that will go by your EIN number as the guarantee, not your social, because you, as we said before, you don't want to be responsible for any overpayment, underpayment, any problems with the credit card. The treasurer and the accountant should not have a credit card. That is dangerous. And then there's no checks and balances. If you still have a petty cash account around, keep it in a safe place and probably a lockbox, and limit how much is in there and what you're willing to use for expenses for that. When I've had churches, and our office had one in the past, it was for, like, if the homeless person comes by and needs a meal or something like that. But you still have to write down, you're not going what it was for. You're not going to get a receipt from some of these people coming through. Okay. Sales tax. If your church needs to pay sales tax, there is paperwork to file, and in some cases, you can get around paying the sales tax in your state. Now, I don't know all the different states here, so I'm only familiar with California, but I'm sure it's pretty close. Per capita and general mission giving, remittance is done through your receiving center. In our area, it is the Synod, but every area may be different. Make sure with the per capita that you remember to say thank you. I have the stated clerk in our presbytery send out thank you notes to every church for paying their per capita. We shouldn't just thank church members, we should thank the churches as a whole. Guard your restricted funds. Have your board or session approve large expenditures, and at the end of the year, send them a report of the variance from the beginning of the year to the end of the year and explain why if there is a large discrepancy or you spend a large amount out of one of your special fund accounts, why?
Well, let's talk about reconciling the checkbook. As hard as it is, I know for small churches, it is important for you to separate the duties between somebody who is looking at the bank statement and processing all the checks and expenses, that sort of thing, and who reconciles the account. We had a church in our presbytery that had an administrative assistant who figured out a way to give a bank statement to the treasurer, and they reconciled the bank account inside the software. The treasurer did that, but the bank statement the person had given them was not the real bank statement. And so I encourage the treasurer or somebody who's going to reconcile the bank account to go to the bank website or get the bank statement in the mail and actually go and do that, because this admin person had found ways to cipher 20, I think it was $40,000 off of the church's books over a period of 2 years, and had it completely hidden, even though somebody else was doing the reconciliation. So it's important for that to be done by somebody different than the person who's regularly doing the receiving of money and writing of the checks. Make sure you clear up your old items that haven't been cleared through the bank on a regular basis. Make sure you have as many checks and balances as possible, depending on the size of your church, because we are convinced, we have been told by others, that the majority of fraud is committed by those who are most trusted, because they have little oversight and the temptation becomes very great. Now, I've often said to people, even said it to my financial affairs committee at the presbytery, if I'm going to steal some money, if I'm going to slip some money off of this presbytery, I'm going to have to get about $3 or $4 million. I'm not going to do it for 20,000, but there are people who feel as though 20,000 is like $1 million to them in the midst of their need. And so there are plenty of people in churches that are constantly ciphering money off. So I encourage you to have checks and balances there and realize that the most trusted people are the ones who usually commit the fraud, as much as we
Trust
don't want them
is
to be.
not an internal control.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about restricted funds. Most money given to the church is unrestricted. And so that means that the board can do anything they want to with that money. Okay. And we call those board restricted funds if the church decides to do something other than the general fund for it. Let's say they decide to set up a music fund or a youth fund that's separate from the general budget, or they're going to set up a camp fund, whatever it is. If the board restricts it, the board can unrestrict it at any time, and it doesn't have to be the same board. Next year's board can unrestrict it at any time they want to, unless some donor in the church has added money to that restricted fund because the board said, well, we want to beef this fund up, so if you want to give to it, you can. Soon as donor restricted money ends up into a board restricted fund, it becomes a donor restricted fund. Okay. just so you understand those two differences. A restricted fund, a donor restricted fund, is extremely important for you to um, keep track of everything that is spent out of that fund, and make sure that it is being used for the purpose of the restriction. I brought something up at the conference this year when I was when Diane and I were doing this at the Chicago conference for mid councils, and I said, well, I remember that somebody, I don't remember who it was, donated some money for a hospital wing in memory of his mother. Well, I found out it was Garth Brooks did this for his mother, and when the fund or the um, wing of the hospital never got built, the church or the he turned around, sued the hospital, and the hospital had to give him back twice as much money as he originally donated because they didn't do with the restricted money what the donor asked them to do. Therefore, that's why I said that the treasurer should check with the board and say, do you really want to accept this restriction if somebody puts it on? Because then you're responsible for doing what the donor has asked for and what you've accepted. We had one church in our presbytery out here in San Jose that decided that they were going to create a memorial wall for ashes, and then people in the congregation could come and bury their ashes at the church. Now, in California and probably in other states, if you get into the funeral business and the cemetery business, you need to be very careful about that. But this church did that, collected all kinds of funds, and then somewhere along the line, they never built the wall. And they called me in and they said, can we use this money for the youth fund? I said, oh, no, you cannot use it for the youth fund. And then all of a sudden there was this frustration because they wanted to use this money that they knew they were never going to build the wall. So you've got to use the money for how it is restricted and keep accurate documents. I'm going to guess out of 200 people here tonight that there is probably 150 of them who have a fund at their church lingering around on their books or in a savings account someplace that you have no idea where that money came from. And the majority of people on the board don't know where that money came from. It's been hanging around for just years and years and years and carried on the books of the church. And I'm going to suggest that it's really important that you do everything you can to figure out how that money is used here or how can be used. Here in California, the only way we can use money like that is to go to the Attorney General of the state of California and get them to approve another use for that money. Now, I've got an end around in case you've got an idea that you want to do that, but I won't put it on a recorded line. So you might have to send me an email about that. Keep accurate records of all restrictions and make sure they're there on a regular basis. I would even suggest you add notes to the bottom of your balance sheet on your annual report that says this is where the money came from, this is how much it still has in it, and this is the way we can use this money. If anybody's got a way to use that, let us know, because we would love to honor their wishes. And I think I said most of this, but do keep keep good records so that if anybody comes and questions how you used the money, you've got the documentation to prove it in case they say, did you really use this for the restrictions that my parents put on this when they gave you the money, that kind of thing. Again, back to board restricted funds like benevolence funds where the board puts money aside. They become donor restricted if any money comes in from the congregation. If you have a fund that, as Diane said earlier, you pay for the homeless people who stop by your door, which we have that out here in California all the time. I had somebody say they were on their way from Seattle um, to Texas, but they stopped by my little church and way out in the middle of Santa Cruz County, which is right on the ocean, not on the way from Seattle to Texas. And they wanted me to give them money. Um, I can give them money out of this benevolence fund, but if it is something that the board restricted for that purpose, I need to be sure and check with and make sure it's given out in the proper way and not just loosely given and could be used for people in the congregation who have some kind of a need or that sort of thing. It's really important to be careful how we use our board restricted funds. Scholarships are the same way. If you can't have a scholarship fund for people in your church to go to high school. It's got to be a broader base than just a few people. I've had plenty of churches say, "Oh, we've got somebody going to seminary, and we want to give money to them, but we want to run it through the church so we get the donation." Well, that's called tax evasion, and so you want to make sure that you don't set up a designated fund, restricted fund for people. If you don't have a large enough group of people, have scholarship applications brought in and make sure that the people really do have that need. So got to watch that kind of stuff and do it according to IRS standards. Reserve funds are usually a board restricted fund. That's why it fits into this particular category. And I would say that every church really ought to work at, and I know churches love to spend every dollar they get, and they love to run to the congregation and say, "Oh, we're running out of money. We can't pay the bills. You got to give us the money." People are going to respond better to a church that uses money wisely and asks for generous contributions than they are for people who misuse the money, spend it where they don't have it, and then don't have any money to pay the utility bills. So I really encourage you to have 2-3 months worth of money around so that you can use that money when expenses or income is low, to cover your expenses, and then replenish that account as soon as possible. You might have to adjust the amount every year, but it's really important to encourage your board to have a reserve funds that covers 2 or 3 months worth of expenses. Investment accounts, restricted or not. I mean, they can be board restricted or they can be donor restricted. It's best to, if you have enough money to invest, hire somebody outside the church to do the investing for you. Don't say have somebody in the church say, "Oh, well, I'm going to run over to this brokerage account that doesn't charge us any fees because we want to avoid paying the fees, and I'll just run the investments for you." Don't put somebody in under that kind of responsibility. Don't give them that kind of temptation. Don't put them in a position where everybody is going to be upset with them if they lose some money in their stock investing. And there's a whole lot of guidelines. If you are going to do investing as a church, you have become a fiduciary, and don't become so conservative that you put everything in CDs, because a good conservative position of a fiduciary responsibility has at least 60% of the money in stocks. Otherwise, you are not even gaining on inflation. You're losing money every year, even though you might be getting a little bit of interest. So it's very important for you to be wise when you're doing investment accounting, or have investment accounts as a church. Let's talk about employees.
Ed,
Yeah.
sorry, we have about 5 minutes and then we have to take questions.
Oh, okay. Then we're way behind, but okay.
Yeah, so we want to make sure we get to the review part at least.
All right, let's move forward here. You'll see in here that there's a lot of stuff about clergy compensation, benefits, budgets. It's very important for you to do a review every year.
Yeah.
Diane?
You can do a review or you can do an audit. A review is fine, and we recommend for smaller churches that they get together with another church and do each other's. And then it doesn't cost them any money, and it's really easy. If you can't do a full review or a full audit every year, break it down into like 3 years so that everything gets checked every 3 years. But if possible, try to do it all at once. You do not have to go hire a CPA to do this. You can do it yourself. And Ed posted the book that he wrote, and that is very helpful. And I've helped several churches and organizations use the book to get through their audit. Okay, make sure you have the bylaws and update them. They're going to want all that too. And it can be a review at any time of the year, usually at the end of your fiscal year, though. Insurance and preparing for a disaster. Make sure you have enough insurance and you have insurance for everything you need. Take pictures of everything, even things you don't use. If you have a problem, a disaster, the insurance company will want pictures. They will pay for stuff. They don't ask whether you use it or not. Have a disaster preparedness policy. Make sure there is like $10,000 that you can set up easily for the pastor and the board to spend on necessities and things they need, and have a quick process for them to access those funds and get that stuff done. Make sure if you have to mobilize and move your services that you don't change the time that you meet. If it requires rebuilding, take into account if you make your building bigger, don't forget the parking. We had a church that we had to sell because they did not have enough parking and weren't allowed to get the occupancy permit because they didn't think this through when purchasing the property. Lessons learned. Make sure you know where the permanent papers are. You keep receipts for 3 years, any tax things for 7 years. I recommend storing them online. They're much more secure. And if a lot of presbyteries and church and some churches and synods are, our synod is all remote.
Let's see. So these are the books that are available for you on Amazon. And this book here is by a friend of ours, Elaine Summerfield, Church Compensation. So that might be helpful to you if you're looking for information about paying pastors and church employees. Okay, questions? We're open for that.
I've got a
For
question.
the spirit of questions, we're going to ask that you raise your electronic hand and we will acknowledge you. Carol, please feel free to ask your question. Thank you.
Sure. So my question is about the compensation for the pastor. How do you decide whether a pastor is a W-2 or a 1099? I've been doing some reading myself and just want to get some clarification on that.
Sure. It's very simple. All pastors are W-2 employees. There is no such thing as a 1099 for a pastor, according to the IRS. But keep in mind that a pastor is not required to pay in their employment Social Security tax or Medicare tax, and the church should not treat them as a church employee. They should treat them as self-employed and pay them on a W-2 as if it's a 1099. Put in the first box. Let me see if I can go back to that slide real quick. Oh, there it is. Okay, in box number 1, put in their salary and put in the housing allowance in box number 14, I believe it is,
Are you showing that screen?
and leave all the rest of these things blank because you are not paying them Social Security wages like FICA taxes. They are subject to self-employment, SECA taxes, self-employment taxes. If they choose to ask you to pay estimated taxes for them, if they file a W-4 with you and say, please take out an extra $100 for every paycheck, then you can put that number here in box 2, but
Are
you
you
do
showing the
not.
screen? Are you showing it? Because I'm not seeing. Is everyone seeing it? Or
Oh,
maybe.
I'm not sharing again, am I?
Oh, okay.
Hang on a minute. Let me share. I got to figure out where I can do that now. I've got to get back to. All right, I got to end this. Yep, I thought I was still sharing and I'm not. And I got to figure out how to not share because I can't get to my Zoom. Where's my Zoom? There it is. Okay, let me share it again. There we go. There you go. Can you see that?
It's coming up. Yes.
Okay. So again, box 1, you put in the salary. Box 14, you put in the housing allowance. And only if
How do you
they ask you on a W-4 to keep some money aside for them to pay their estimated taxes. They're really required to pay quarterly taxes estimate, but they can do it through payroll deduction. And the same thing would be true if they ask for state. But the Social Security and the Medicare, you do not put in for a clergy person because they are not subject to FICA taxes, and you are not required to pay FICA taxes for them. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
they're required to pay Social SECA taxes when they file their income tax.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the next person we saw was Ashley.
Hi, thank you so much for all this info. My church is just transitioning to like an electronic bookkeeping. And a lot of my church is not familiar with that. So we were wondering if there was a specific program that you guys recommend or have experience using, just as we get started and try to shop around for what works for other churches.
If it's
Sure,
a really small church, most of our small churches just use QuickBooks.
Okay.
But there are a couple church ones. We use Shelby Systems, but we use the governing body version of that. But I do have about 3 churches that use the church version of that for their software also. But there are others out there. You want to check. You might check with your bank because only certain softwares work with certain banks, and if you're going to be sending files electronically, you want to do that if at all
Okay,
possible.
that makes sense.
Okay, so go to your bank and ask them what accountings, and they may not have one that's nonprofit. You do want one that does nonprofit and will recognize the church, and if you're doing your own payroll, can handle the pastor's payroll.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually great because we don't have anybody on payroll, so we don't have to worry about that
Okay.
part.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
QuickBooks
Let's
works
go.
very well.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go. We're going to get as many questions we can in the last few minutes. And so we're going to go now. I think it was Donald and then is it Janine? Okay, Donald and Janine. We're going to ask that you ask just one question so we can get as many questions in as possible. Thank you.
So you said this, that the restricted accounts needed to each be in their own account. We have over 30 restricted accounts. Now, they're not in the same account as our church operating checking, but what would be the advantage of those each being in a separate account?
Okay, I would say that they need to be in a separate account other than the church checking account. You can lump all of the restricted funds together, especially let's say you've got 30 of them, you're going to invest that money and so forth and so on. Just keep good records of how you spend that money, but they don't have to be each in a separate account, just someplace other than the church checking.
Thank you.
I had a question about the board that you kept mentioning as you were going. I don't know of a board at our church. So is that like a subset of session? Is that a
It is
presbytery?
it in a church setting, it's a session. In a presbytery or
Okay,
synod, it's a board. And
got
it's
it.
yeah.
Okay, so for a church level, that would just be equivalent to session.
Hmm.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks.
We're going to invite Dixie.
Hi, yeah, thanks again for sponsoring this. This is great information. I just want to know what most churches do about workers' compensation. I didn't realize we aren't paying that for our people. We have a pastor as an employee, and then we have another worship director that's also an employee. Do most congregations pay workers' compensation for that? And I'm in Florida, so that could be different for different states.
It's going to be different for different states. Depends on whether or not your state requires workers' comp for uh, nonprofits, for churches, that kind of thing.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I don't believe Florida does, which is, I think, why we aren't paying it. Great, thank you.
We do have time for a few more questions, and so we ask that you would please raise your electronic hand. Thank you.
I see a few of them raised. There's Justin and David and
I'll speak
Catherine.
first. I'll speak first. I'm real quick. Thank you for everything. Are you going to say that
Little hand there.
PowerPoint out to each of us so we can read it? Because you're going awfully fast.
I'm sorry, I could not understand that.
The
Can we do that
PowerPoint
again?
presentation that you shared with us today, are you going to be able to send that to us?
Yes, I will send the slides that we have used to the Synod. They'll make them available for you.
Thank you.
I'll jump in real quick, if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It's been wonderful. I took over financial admin for our church earlier this last year after several years of turnover and instability in that role, and I'm working on cleaning up a lot. Are there things I should, as I look back at the last few years of books, are there things I should focus on finding or regenerate? How do I get the books back into order? What would your top priorities be?
Well, excuse me. My top priority would be, when did you have your last review or audit? You're gonna want to do one of those soon, and make sure that every account that you have, like a checking account and investment accounts, that those are actually on the balance sheet. We several years ago closed a church, and unbeknownst, and until I started helping close the church and I got a hold of their financials, they did not have any of their investments listed on their balance sheet. So we had to recreate everything in Excel to close the church to because the attorney general needs copies of so many years worth of statements. So make sure what you actually have paper for is actually in the accounting software and that you have procedures set up for payables and receivables so that there is checks and balances.
Thank you. So we're going to invite Janelle and Katharina, and then if we have time, we'll come back to you, Carol. But we're almost at our ending time, and so we're going to get those last couple questions in.
Thank you. My
Just,
question was about whether
just so you
churches.
know, I'm willing to stay for another 5 or 10 minutes if we need to. Okay.
Okay, thank
But
you.
yeah, Janelle, go ahead.
When you were talking about like the stock accounts and things like that, one of the questions that my session had was about whether or not churches can use like interest bearing accounts, like say like for our scholarship, if we moved it to like one of those high yield savings accounts versus like a regular savings account that we have through our business partnership with Chase. Like, is that something that churches can do? I wasn't sure if there were like any restrictions on churches using like high yield accounts versus like regular business checking and savings accounts.
No, there are no restrictions on churches using any kind of savings account, any kind of um, CDs, bonds, stock, any of that kind of thing. The church themselves might, the board of the church, the session might put that restriction on, but there are no legal restrictions. The church could even invest in cryptocurrency if they wanted to. I would not recommend that, but as far as what's legal, they could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Kathy. Thank you again for this presentation and for taking my question. This regarding the housing allowance. The terms of call from Presbytery gave a percentage. In our community, that percentage is much lower than the actual rental rates, comparative rental rates. So how do you decide what to use, and how do you handle utilities? Do they calculate into the housing allowance?
Good. The utilities is either you can include it into the housing allowance or you can have a separate allowance for utilities. That either one of those works, and that a utility allowance can either be reimbursable. All they have to do is pay the bill and give you a copy of the bill, and then you reimburse them, something along those lines. The presbytery or the synod should not set the housing allowance. The IRS allows the clergy and the session to agree on an amount for that that's going to be a housing allowance, and it can be as much as 100% of the total compensation package. There are no restrictions to how much the housing allowance can be. There are restrictions as to how much the housing allowance can be considered income tax free on the tax return, and that is a choice of three different evaluations. The clergy can only use as much as they spend on actual housing expenses, and the rest of the housing allowance then becomes taxable income. And they are also limited by the fair rental value of the property in the community in which you live as to how much they can claim as housing allowance. Those are tax rules. There are no restrictions as to how much you can claim as a housing allowance. as far as the church is concerned. That just has to be, I say, done at the beginning of the year. You cannot do a housing allowance assignment retroactive, but you can change it as you go along. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
I have to go to the presbytery and say, or just override it and go to the church and say, this is the package we're approving.
Looks like Robert has a question. Robert, you are muted.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, finally. I just have a general question. I'm a treasurer for a presbytery, but there's QuickBooks, and now there's QuickBooks. We have the desktop QuickBooks, which they are no longer going to support, and they're trying to move people to QuickBooks online. Do you have any recommendations as to whether online is preferable, or what's going on with the desktop?
Sure. I have used both. I am very familiar with both of them. The only feature that I think is missing on QuickBooks Online is that you can't have 5 or 6 windows open at once and bounce between them. You sort of have to reopen a window if you want to move from one window to the other. I think they'll fix that somewhere down the line, but for the most part, QuickBooks Online is almost easier to use than the desktop version was. And so I think you won't have any problem switching over and learning QuickBooks Online.
Thank you.
We have Carol.
And the nice thing about online versions of any software is you don't have to update it on a regular basis. You don't have to go out and buy it again, all those kinds of things. It's automatically updated.
It looks like we have Carol and Carl. Do you have time for those questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, happy to help.
Who's first?
Well,
Thank
Carol,
you.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So just a follow-up question to the housing. You had mentioned that the housing, they pay their self-employment something taxes, but if they don't use everything for housing and they only use say 80%, the 20% is taxable. But is that a responsibility of the church, or the pastor just needs to know that, or his accountant would actually know that?
Well, the tax preparer would know that. The accountant would know that. It's not a
Okay.
church responsibility.
Okay.
However, I would encourage you to encourage your pastor to go to a tax firm that has used or has done taxes for pastors in the past, because most accountants have no idea what you're talking about. Matter of fact, I went to the IRS because they were auditing our presbytery, and I explained to them that they couldn't audit us because that particular person was a pastor and we didn't have to pay payroll taxes for them. And they said to me, the auditor said to me, well, that's not true. Everybody has to pay payroll taxes. I said, no. They're your rules, and no, the person does not have to pay. They said, oh, well, wait, that's all wrong. So even the IRS doesn't know what they already know or what they've already said. And so make sure your clergy person goes to an accountant, tax preparer that knows nonprofit law and knows clergy law.
Right, but that's entirely up to him. That doesn't have anything to do with the church. I can recommend it, but
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. It's not the church's responsibility.
Okay. All right. And then for education and education and transportation, is that taxable?
That is not
Not.
if
Okay.
they give you receipts. If they don't give you receipts, you're supposed to add it to their box one wages.
I see. No, we just give it to him as part of it. His housing, whether he uses it or not for transportation and education, whether he uses it or not, we just give him.
Well, see, if they don't give you a receipt for it, then it's what is called an unaccountable reimbursement plan, whether you give it to them ahead of time or after the fact. Um, it's an unaccountable plan, and an unaccountable plan has to be added to their wages and reported on their W-2 in box one with their salary.
Okay,
So
thank
you want an accountable plan. You want them to give you either mileage or expenses for their car, and you really want to send the money directly to their continuing education place rather than give it to them. But if you give it to them, you need them to give you receipts in what the IRS calls a reasonable amount of time, which they consider about 60 days.
It is 60 days. That's what it says.
So we have Carol and then Denise.
No, not Carol.
I'm sorry, we have Carl and Denise.
Yes. Can you can you hear my audio?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Our church board, the board of elders just created a position called for a church finance committee, and there's three of us on it, and we have no guidance. The church has a treasurer. As the finance committee, what should we, any guidance or any ideas of what we should be doing, the three of us?
Sure. As
Wait.
part of the finance committee, you should be getting financial statements every month from the treasurer, accountant, or bookkeeper, or whoever does the books. You should keep track of if you see anything unusual in these statements, feel free to question it. You could be the ones that could create the policies for how things are done with the treasurer and the accountant. You can, in some cases, in our presbytery, the finance committee even looks at leases and loans. So you could do that. There is plenty for you to do.
I'm sure there is. So this would be a continuing committee. I
Right.
mean, we have a treasurer,
Yes.
so it would
Yes.
go on.
Yes. And every month you meet probably and you look at those financials primary and per capita track, make sure that's coming in. If you guys do per capita, I know not everybody collects it. So
And we should present our findings at the monthly session meeting, really.
Right.
right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If you send me an email, I will send you a copy of the guidelines for the job description for the church finance committee, so you can look at that as well.
That would be wonderful. I will send you that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we have Denise.
Hello, I am about 6 months into being the treasurer at my church. The previous treasurer decided it was time for him to retire. And I just said, okay, I'll try it. And I must say that I have been very overwhelmed in the last 6 months.
I'll bet.
It's getting better. I still work full time. Every other treasurer that I've known at my church, which I've been there for 50 years, everybody else was retired. So it's been interesting. But one of my questions is, we are using church windows as the software. I have worked with Quicken in the past. I have worked with QuickBooks in the past. And I found them to be so much easier than Church Windows. And I don't know if anybody has actually used Church Windows and maybe found some workarounds and ways to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I don't know. We've had a couple of churches in our presbytery that have used Church Windows. I believe it is an accounting software as opposed to a bookkeeping software, which makes it a little bit more complicated than QuickBooks or Quicken. And so I think it would be helpful for you. Hopefully somebody out of these 200 people that are here knows something about Church Windows, or you might talk to the board about switching over from that to something that's a little bit easier. How large is your congregation?
We're at about 230 people at this point.
Okay, you're right at that area where I would be suggesting you either move from QuickBooks to accounting or something along those lines, because you might need an accounting software, but I don't know enough about Church Windows to know whether that would be the one I would recommend.
Any church that I know that's been on it isn't on it anymore. But based on your size, but based on your size of the church, I'm with Ed. Your cusp, you may want accounting software.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I'm learning it. It's just taken a huge
But like I said
amount of
earlier,
time.
check with the bank and see what they recommend.
Okay, I can do
Yeah,
that.
we just had one of our nonprofits that are connected with our presbytery get told by the bank that they have been working with for years that we can't any longer download the bank information into the software. I can't imagine a major bank not allowing something to be transferred into QuickBooks, but they have decided they're no longer going to allow that. So banks are changing their tune on computered software. So.
Yeah, we're working with a credit union that is diagonally across the street from the church.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well,
there you go.
then they might be willing to work with you.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I see two more hands. Stephanie and Charlene. Charlene. Yeah, there we go. Stephanie, are you there? I don't see your picture, but I see your hand. Nope. All right. Charlene, why don't you?
Hi, I'm Charlene. I'm the treasurer of the Presbytery of Long Island. I just wanted to make a comment about QuickBooks. So yes, of course, they want you to leave the desktop version and they're going to charge you $700 a year. You can actually buy the online version from TechSoup for $80 a year. So don't forget, don't spend all that money to stay on the desktop version. And then, yes, I came from a church where we used Church Windows. We did actually dump it and went to a product called Breeze, which now was bought by Tiley, but it works very well. And you can actually keep a lot of information in Breeze, plus the giving record information. So you can find me at the Presbytery of Long Island if you have questions.
Okay.
And
Good.
TechSoup is a good resource for everybody to use to get software as well as equipment. I haven't tried to buy a computer from them, but we are in the process of trying to get new computers for some people. And
I
that is a
actually have
possibility.
used their refurbished ones numerous times, particularly the laptops. So
Good. Good to know. Cindy, you're there. I'm still looking for Stephanie Slappendell something if she's still online. But Cindy, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm new to the treasurer position. But what I would comment on is QuickBooks, I feel online is a very good application. We recently moved from Church Windows to Aplos, A-P-L-O-S. It's a very good integrated GL system. It gives me, I'm a CPA, it gives me the control systems that I like. And on the front end, deposits and tracking donor receipts, it's very good once we have to get on that beat. We just started in January, so
Well, good.
I can
Good to know.
recommend that. I definitely would want your slides and want to order your book. But if could you just put in the chat or put on the page what your email address is, because I failed to copy it
Oh,
at that
sure.
time.
We'll do that.
Thank you. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
I just want to say that once we prepare the video for posting, we will also post the PowerPoint and any other resources that the presenters provide. So we'll make sure that you have access to that.
Okay.
I think we have asked our questions. I don't see another hand. I just want to say thank you to both Diane and to Ed for being with us this evening. And I want to thank you, all the wonderful treasurers and finance people from the various congregations and presbyteries, for spreading the word. What happens next is that we try to find other ways of resourcing you. And so if there are groups of people that want to continue in conversation, if the Synod can help facilitate that, we'll be happy to do so. But would you join me in thanking our presenters this evening? If you could just do the jazz hands or give the thumbs up or balloons or whatever you could say to thank them for the information. They provide great resourcing for our whole denomination. And we are so thankful for the wisdom that they bring to this particular moment. And so thank you so much. And good night, everyone. Blessings and peace to you. And again, this conversation can continue with you all gathering together and talking and sharing resources. And we will be happy to help you facilitate that type of conversation.
Very nice.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.